So you're visiting New Zealand for just over 2 weeks and want to see as much of the country as possible, but also stick to a reasonable budget. I'm going to run through a 2-week itinerary covering the South Island and some figures to consider on your journey. The South Island is characterised by the Southern Alps that run almost the length of the country, and they are what a lot of people think of when they think of New Zealand. The huge lakes, wild rainforests and snow-capped mountains are mostly located in the South Island, and as such, that's where our road trip is going to be. There's only really one spot to start any journey in the South Island: Christchurch, the Garden City. Travelling here, you have to be especially conscious of jet lag because it's so far away from everywhere, especially Europe. So taking your first day slowly and spending it exploring the city would be my recommendation. You do not want to start driving in a foreign country, possibly on the different side of the road, on a few hours of poor quality plane sleep. The city still shows signs of the earthquakes that hit over 10 years ago, and there are lots of amazing free things to do in Christchurch that we've covered in another video, as well as the fantastic Willowbank Wildlife Reserve. Once you've rested up, it's time to begin your journey through this wonderful country. Day 1. Kaikoura. The drive up to Kaikoura from Christchurch is roughly 2.5 hours and follows the coast for large amounts of the journey. Along the way you'll catch glimpses of mountains out to the west, and if you're careful, seals lounging on the rocks along the coastline. Arriving into Kaikoura, it's quickly clear why people make sure to stop off here. The Kaikoura mountain range is so close to the coast and has a beautiful view, no matter whether there's snow or not. If you can afford it, heading out on a whale watching trip is something unique to Kaikoura, and you'll have the opportunity to potentially see seals, dolphins, seabirds, and most importantly, whales. The reason Kaikoura is so good for whale watching is the sea shelf drops off really close to the coast, allowing the whales to descend to the depths where they're happy swimming. Don't worry if you don't see any whales, you'll actually receive an 80% refund and have that 2-hour trip for basically pennies. There is a chance the trip will be cancelled if they have no sightings of whales at all during the day, so just be prepared and have other plans. One other plan would be the Kaikoura Peninsula Walk. Here you can get really close to the seal colony. Just don't get too close. They are wild animals and really would prefer if you don't pose for a selfie with them. Enjoy them from a reasonable distance and make sure to check out the bird life around the peninsula too. Kaikoura has a range of restaurants to eat at, and the fish and chips were amazing when we visited. If you're travelling by car, then you could either stay in Kaikoura or drive the remainder up to Blenheim, located in the heart of wine country. If you're in a camper van, I'd recommend driving up the coast to stay at Kekarengu. There's a huge beachside camping area with a coffee van located on site. And on the way up the coast from Kaikoura, make sure to stop at Ohau Point Seal Colony. There are literally hundreds upon hundreds of seals here, and there are very regularly seal pups playing in the sheltered rocks. This area was badly affected by the 2016 earthquake, and the seals used to play in the waterfall, but that got completely cut off due to landslides. It hasn't deterred the seals, and they will likely be out in force when you visit. Day 2. Nelson. The next leg of your journey takes you all the way up the east coast and then across the north of the island. Depending on when you leave, a short stop off at Picton to appreciate the Queen Charlotte Sound or a visit to a winery in Blenheim could be on the agenda. Picton is a small coastal town that is home to the Inter-Islander ferry and many nature tours depart from here. If you're unsuccessful in Kaikoura, it may be worth looking at booking a tour with Eco Tours to travel out on the Sound. There are regularly dolphins spotted and the bird life is again unique. They even offer a swimming with dolphins experience if that's your kind of thing. A little bit pricey. The journey across the north coast of the island to Nelson is full of routes down the valleys, with the Pelorus Bridge providing a great spot to stop off at and have a little break. Another spot to head up to that's slightly off the beaten track is Cable Bay. This is a sheltered swimming spot with a very unique looking layout, and it's not too far off the main highway close to Nelson. The city of Nelson is home to the Central New Zealand, a monument on top of a hill at the closest geographic centre of the country. If you like your walks, the trip to the top provides great views out over the national parks and surrounding areas, and there's all kinds of restaurants in the city. And even the jeweller, Jens Hansen, who created the One Ring for the Lord of the Rings films, is located in the centre of the city. Nelson itself has many national parks within throwing distance, and the Abel Tasman is probably one of the most well known, being home to one of New Zealand's great walks. I would recommend it if you can spare the time heading up to Kaiteri or Marahau to get a taste of the park, as its golden sands and bright blue water are spectacular. There are kayak trips from Kaiteri that take you along various parts of the park by water, There's campsites across the Nelson region and many hostels located in the city, so you'll feel almost spoiled for choice when it comes to accommodation. Day 3. Westport. Heading out to the west coast, it's time to make sure you've packed your bug spray. Sandflies are probably the worst thing about New Zealand, so for the next few days I'd advise making sure to bring long trousers and a thin long sleeve top. There's so many different bug sprays out there, but for some people, the bugs just don't care and will still want to eat you no matter what. I'd advise this morning be spent exploring the Abel Tasman area, and if you fancy an early start, heading all the way north to near Golden Bay is a fabulous route. Located near the top of the Tekapo Hill is the Ngaru Caves. They offer a guided tour through the caves for $30 each, maybe a little pricey, but take a look and see if you fancy the stop. It's definitely a unique experience if you haven't ventured into caves before. On the other side of the hill, you'll be greeted by open plains and located a little bit down the road, the Anatoki salmon fishing area. Here you can catch your own salmon and get it cooked for a tasty lunchtime treat. They also have a little farmyard animals section, and the nearby stream is home to eels that you can feed. Watch your fingers. Slightly further down the road are the magical Te Waikato Springs, I think that's right. On a clear and sunny day, the water there is absolutely magical, with all types of colours visible in the water. Make sure to be respectful and don't put a foot in the springs because they're an important spiritual and cultural spot for the local Maori people. By venturing up to Golden Bay, you do now have quite a drive through to Westport of 4 hours plus. If instead you'd rather head more directly to Westport, then make sure to stop off and enjoy the views of the Buller Gorge between Murchison and Westport. Located just outside of Murchison is New Zealand's longest swing bridge, and other activities at this stop include gold panning, jet boat rides and a 160-metre zip line. They're all at a cost, but do provide a nice spot to break the drive up. If you fancy a bit of a hike, then why not stop at the Old Ghost Road, a community-maintained track that goes right up into the hills for multi-day hikes, but provides a lovely stroll through the forest to get up close to nature. One fun little location you might want to look out for is the T-Rex tree, named because of its apparent close appearance to the dinosaur. Westport itself is a pretty tiny place with very limited accommodation options. There's a campsite right on the beach for camper vans, and holiday parks and hostels though, you're not going to find so many. If you arrive early into Westport, then why not drive out to visit the seal colony? You've got views all the way out over the Tasman Sea, and the whole route for the lighthouse and back will take a couple of hours, but it's a good opportunity to see some more wildlife and stretch your legs. Day 4. Hokitika. On the journey south from Westport, there's a huge range of different activities available. From spending time underground and looking at glowworms with Underground Adventures New Zealand, quite a pricey option for the day, but definitely a unique experience, or looking at the wonders of the Pukaki rocks. These rocks appear like pancakes and take on the appearance of various creatures if you look closely enough. There's also some large blowholes in between the formations, so hope you don't mind getting a little damp. To be honest, whichever of the designated stop-off points you choose along the west coast, you're going to be greeted by fabulous beaches and native forests. Greymouth is a little stop-off that might be worth it for some food, but there's not a huge amount to do there really. It's the former home of the Monteith's Brewery, but other than that, just keep going. If you don't want to head south, you can actually head east on Highway 7 and take a free visit to one of New Zealand's biggest mining disasters, the Brunner Mine. Located less than 15 minutes from Greymouth, this is the site of a huge coal and brick producing facility. The tragedy struck in 1865 when 65 people were killed due to safety protocols not being looked after. There's lots of buildings visible today, and you can still smell sulphur in the air. Hokitika is well known for a few things: driftwood signs, a gorge, jade jewellery and the National Kiwi Centre. The gorge itself is a bit out of town and is a constantly changing flow of water from light blue to white. You never know what you're going to see. Work is currently being done on one of the bridges across the gorge, so access is slightly limited, but it's got 3,500 reviews for a reason. Back in town, it's hard to avoid the massive amount of jewellery stores providing various pieces, largely featuring jade. This is actually where I got Caris' engagement ring. The National Kiwi Centre costs roughly $35 each, and is home to all kinds of wildlife, from a huge tank full of eels that you can feed, to a crayfish pond where you can attempt to reel your own crayfish in. The stars of the show really are the kiwi though. You're not able to take any photos or videos when inside the area, because their eyes are super sensitive to the light. When we visited, there was a pair of kiwi making an absolute racket and dancing all over the place. Amazing creatures, and one of the few places you'll be able to guarantee seeing them. It's also home to this fantastic picture of a dog that for whatever reason we couldn't help but burst out laughing at. Head down to Hokitika Beach and see the all-famous Hokitika driftwood sign. Constantly changing in shape and size, why not try to make your own sign like the jet lag contestants did? We gave it a go. Thoughts? This is an amazing beach to watch the sunset on as you're looking right out west to the Tasman Sea. Hokitika has got a fair few restaurants and spots to eat, as well as a large New World supermarket to grab some dinner in. Day 5. Fox Glacier. Heading out and further along the west coast, you enter Glacier country. Before reaching the first glacier, you'll pass through an old gold mining town called Ross. A tiny little town with a small little store and a pub that does one of the best roast dinners I've had. The information centre is also worth popping into, as you can hire gold pans from the centre, and then after walking 10-15 minutes up, start searching for gold in a stream that runs through the area the old gold mine used to be. We had some success, but there's definitely some questionable bits of gold in our collection. Heading on, you first enter the Franz Josef Glacier town. While the glaciers have been disappearing back into the mountains, you're still able to do walks to see the glaciers for a distance. The Franz Josef Glacier you're not really able to get that close to, however the view across the valley has waterfalls falling on each side, and on a clear day would provide a view across the mountains. The walk to the front also has a hidden little section that leads you through the natural forest and a much windier path than the main one, well worth the detour. Other options to get to the top of the glaciers include helicopter flights that drop you on top of the glaciers, give spectacular views of the Southern Alps on the journey to and from, but it's not a cheap option. So sticking to a budget, the walks to the glacier fronts would probably be my recommendation here, with maybe a separate trip out to Lake Matheson possible. The Fox Glacier lets you get a view from a little bit closer than the Franz Josef one, and there's a viewpoint at the end that shows how quickly the glacier has retreated. Lake Matheson is a great little stop-off, with a walk around the entire lake taking roughly an hour and a half. On a clear day, you'll get the glimpse of Aoraki and Mount Cook. As night falls, there's a sneaky little walk just north of the township, providing an amazing free experience. The Minnehaha Walk takes you through native forest, and if you're able to let your eyes adjust to the darkness, you'll start to see sparkles of light throughout the dark roots of the trees. These are glowworms, which emit light from their bodies when they're hunting for food. The night is dark and full of possums, so you may hear rustlers alongside the path. While I'd advise not shining any light if you can help it, a low red light will provide enough light to see, but also let you appreciate the glowworms if you're able to point it away. You'll probably run into other glowworm spotters, so make sure to take care when walking in the dark, as people can be surprisingly hard to see. I believe one of the accommodations in the township do offer a guided walk through the area if you prefer to do it in a group rather than heading out alone, but both times we've done it we felt completely safe, just taken by surprise by the possums. Day 6 and 7, Wanaka. We've got 2 days in Wanaka planned because the journey to the town is full of stops and could well take most of the day. Heading out of Fox Glacier, the first recommendation I've got is to stop off at the Ship Creek area. There's a couple of walks, one through a native swamp area that I really recommend, and it gives you the chance to see eels, bird life, and even learn about the native kauri tree and why the European settlers used so much of it. The beach area at Ship Creek is lovely, and we were lucky enough that actually on one of our visits to see dolphins surfing in the waves a few metres out from the coast. The views up and down the west coast from here are incredible, and if you get a sunny day, they really can't be beaten. The next point of interest is the township of Haast, with the mighty Haast River located nearby. We'd highly recommend having some lunch in the Hard Outlet, who do amazing fish and burgers. After the township, you start to travel into the Haast Pass, a beautiful area with many huge waterfalls and areas where rapids flow below the road. You really can't go wrong with stopping at any of the marked points, as all provide a completely different waterfall, all of which are only a few minutes walk away from their car parks. Waterfalls I'd make sure not to miss are Roaring Billy, Thunder Creek Falls, watch out for sandflies, and Fantail Falls, home to many stacks of rocks. After making your way through the majority of the pass, you'll come across the Blue Falls Walk. This is a walk through a beautiful forest area that until a couple of years ago ended with a couple of bridges over some really blue water. Unfortunately, the bridges to get to this area are now closed due to safety concerns, so you're only able to make it to the riverbank, further if you swim, and it's still really impressive, and a great spot to skim some stones. If you're tight on time, it might be worth skipping this, but hopefully it won't be too long before the DOC construct new bridges and it reopens this spectacular area for all. Heading down the road into Wanaka, you pass some spectacular views of the Lake Hauia, again worth a short stop off as the lake is absolutely massive. Wanaka is full of hostels, holiday parks, and even some fairly high-end resort areas. The town itself is located right on the lakefront, with mountain views at the far end and many bars and restaurants that have great views out over the lake. We've stayed in the Hampshire Holiday Park and a couple of hostels, and they were all perfectly nice. The next day, there's plenty of things to do around the Wanaka area, and this is the region we've set 2 days aside for here. One of our favourite things is hiring kayaks to explore the lake. You're actually able to get to an old party island called Ruby Island and back within 3 hours, and it gives a completely different view on the town, and it's so peaceful, with gorgeous views surrounding you in every direction. There's a couple of places to hire kayaks from on the lakefront, both of which are pretty reasonably priced. It might also be worth taking a trip round the lake and seeing that Wanaka tree. You've seen photos of this. If you're looking up what to do on New Zealand, you'll know about the Wanaka tree. If you prefer to stick to dry land, then there's plenty of hikes in the area. From the famous Royce Peak climb to the climb above Diamond Lake, you can't go wrong. We're yet to complete the Royce Peak climb, but I've heard from friends you get some amazing views at the top, but the actual walk up and down isn't massively inspiring. The walk at Diamond Lake, climbing Rocky Mountain, is full of native bird life and some fairly slippy bits, depending on the route you chose. For us, the anti-clockwise route seemed the easier way to climb. However, things may well have changed since we last completed. If you've had enough of testing your legs, what about taxing your brain at Puzzling World? This unique attraction consists of a maze, illusion rooms, and all kinds of puzzles to mess with your perspective. For less than $30, you're able to complete the outdoor maze with 4 different towers to reach, and while you think you could plan a route when you're at the top of one tower to another tower, it's actually not that simple. The cafe area is also full of tables covered in all kinds of puzzles for you to complete, and if you're struggling, the staff will happily show you the solution. Just down the road from Puzzling World is another indoor attraction if the weather really isn't playing ball, the National Transport and Toy Museum. With an absolutely massive collection of over 70,000 toys from many different eras and niches, you're quite certain to find something quirky. It's a fire station full of cars, a couple of hangars worth of planes, and you can easily spend a good couple of hours wandering amongst the exhibits. If you want to take a quick look at the full collection available, there's a massive list on their website of every exhibit. Whatever you've chosen to do in your day in Wanaka, make sure to get some rest and get ready for the next few days, heading out to Queenstown and beyond. So yeah, Queenstown. Wanaka to Queenstown is actually only an hour and a half's drive, with a few spots to stop off at if you're the adrenaline-fueled kind of person. Take a trip to either AJ Hackett Nevis or Kaikoura, Bungee, and enjoy travelling at massive speeds towards the river below. When it comes to activities in Queenstown, you really are spoiled for choice. We're going to adventure out to Glenorchy and then a place literally called Paradise. Along this road, you're able to spot a few Lord of the Rings locations, including the spot Frodo and Sam see the Oliphants, and the location Isengard was CGI'd into. The road isn't that rental car friendly with fords along the road, so make sure you've got a car that can handle the route before heading too far. Back in the centre of the town, you can travel up the skyline to get a view out over the town and the surrounding lake, and then head down the Skyline Luge for some fast-paced fun. If you fancy something a little more chill, head out and play some disc golf and potter around the peninsula just to the south of the town. Another slightly unique spot to visit is Buzz Stop. Here you're able to book an experience to learn all about how honey is made and actually spin your own honey. It's not the cheapest of experiences, but certainly something I'd never had the experience to do before visiting. If you head out of Wanaka early, then a visit to Arrowtown, an old gold mining town with a large Chinese presence, will give you an insight on a completely different aspect of the area's history. We've also been told the Gippsland Valley cheese in Arrowtown produces some fantastic cheese that we're going to try out on our next visit to the area. And the high street is full of your classic souvenir shops and cafes. Regarding food in Queenstown, the fabulous Ferg Burger and its cousin Ferg Baker are located right in the centre of the town and always have huge lines outside. Personally, I'd say you'll be able to find good quality food throughout the town, and the time wasted in line is maybe better spent exploring. Queenstown is probably the most important spot to book your accommodation ahead of time, as it's incredibly popular with tourists. There's a few campsites located not that far from the town, so you're able to get a little head start on the next day's journey. Day 9. Milford Sound or Anau. A long day of driving awaits today, as the road to Milford Sound is long and full of terrors. Okay, not quite terrors, but lots of tourists driving pretty large cars on quite windy roads, so take care and make sure to stay on the left. The journey from Queenstown to Milford Sound is roughly 4 hours without stops, and there's so many spots you'll want to stop off at. You will be heading back along the same route tomorrow, so don't worry if you're not able to see all the spots on the way. You've also got a couple of options, as you could choose to stay in Te Anau, more accommodation options and food options, or actually in Milford Sound. Pricier and much less in the way of food and accommodation choices. The benefits of driving the whole way up are that you can book onto an early cruise on the Sound for the next morning and then take your time driving back to Queenstown. If you're able, I'd advise staying in Milford Sound. This allows you the most time to explore that route to and from Queenstown. The route from Queenstown to Te Anau starts off with fabulous views at the Devil's Staircase along Lake Wakatipu. You could stop off briefly at Kingston to look back up the lake towards Queenstown and see the train repair station in the village. The views are amazing and the jetty provides some brilliant photo opportunities. When reaching Te Anau, it's well worth a stop off to take in the views across the lake that stretches far off to the north. You'll also not want to miss the opportunity to see one of the most endangered birds in New Zealand, the takahe. These can be seen at the bird sanctuary to the south of the town, and you can even have the opportunity to have a guided tour of the bird enclosure at 10:30 a.m. every morning. It's well worth getting up early and heading out of Queenstown early to get there in time for this, and it also means you're going to have more time at these must-stop locations on the road from Te Anau to Milford Sound. Once you're done seeing the fantastic blue orb buoys, it's time to head up Highway 94 towards Milford Sound. All the way along with viewpoints of Lake Te Anau and even a couple of campsites if you're thinking of camping out here. Further up the road, you'll come across the Mirror Lakes. These live up to their name if you're lucky enough to visit on a still day, and give a good spot to stretch your legs on a short walk around the area. If you're still wanting more lake views, then Lake Gunn provides these in abundance. With a short walk through the native forest starting at Cascade Creek campsite, you're soon at the foot of the lake, flanked by mountains on either side. For those of you that love a hike, we couldn't recommend the Key Summit track more. It's roughly 3 hours in total, with a large amount of constant but steady uphill tracks to the top. The first section is all in the tree line, but as you emerge, the views of the mountains surrounding you become clear, and you may be so lucky as to encounter the world's only alpine parrot, the Kia. These cheeky birds are more than happy to come up and peck at your clothes, and we've witnessed them thieving ice cream still in its wrapper. At the peak of the walk, there's the option to do a little alpine trail looping around the top, and the views are almost unparalleled from up here, as on a clear day you can see glacial lakes in the neighbouring mountains. So like I said, there really is so much to do on this route, and we've not even passed the Homer Tunnel yet. This tunnel was hewn out of the mountains and is a 2-kilometre one-way tunnel. You may well be waiting at the lights for a few minutes while traffic comes the other way, and reaching the other end of the tunnel, you're greeted by sheer waterfall-covered cliffs on all sides and a very windy piece of road. So as beautiful as it may be, make sure to stay on your side of the road. Milford Sound itself isn't really a town. There's an airport, port, and a small, little, very expensive shop, along with a couple of accommodation options. Milford Sound is known for its reliably poor weather, but with the rain comes the explosion of waterfalls out of the cliffs. So in some ways, a poor weather day will actually give you the better experience. We'd highly recommend booking onto a cruise around the Sound here, as you have the chance to see seals, and if you're lucky, Fiordland penguins chilling out on the beach. It's maybe best to book for the next morning, as by this point you're probably pretty knackered from all the activities you've completed in the day. If you're staying overnight in the Sound and get lucky with a clear night, make sure to head to the shoreline and enjoy the stars. Day 10, Queenstown Again. Whether you're doing the cruise this morning or last night, it's well worth spending some of the morning taking in the views around Milford Sound. The majority of your day today is driving back to Queenstown and stopping off at those spots you weren't able to do on the way yesterday. If you do fancy another hike, it's a little bit further south of Te Anau. I suggest heading to either the Te Anau Lookout near the Lake Control Gates or Rainbow Reach. Both for the walks from here cover parts of the Kepler Track, which is another of New Zealand's great walks, and you'll suddenly be lost in the native forests once again. Just over an hour's walk from Rainbow Reach, you'll reach the shores of Lake Manapori, giving a spectacular view over larger parts of the Fiordland National Park, and you're really close to a couple of Lord of the Rings locations here. There's a view over the River Anduin, which is just on the other side of the river, and hidden across the road on private property is an area used as the dead marshes for aerial shots. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any way to get close to these. Just nice knowing they're there, right? Heading back into Queenstown will give you some more time to appreciate the vibe of the town, and maybe take a trip to any of those spots you couldn't quite get to previously. You've earned some time to chill out after all that driving back and forth over the last 2 days, but if you do fancy driving a little closer to your destination, then there's a campsite in Lowburn and accommodation in Cromwell or even a little further to Alexandra that might fit the bill. Day 11. Oamaru. After spending a night in whichever town you've chosen, it's time to grab some breakfast and head all the way back out to the east coast, along Highway 85. There's not a massive amount of points to stop off on the route to the coast, so I'd recommend get the majority of driving out of the way. After reaching the coast, a short drive down into Shag Point or Hokitika Point both provide fantastic routes to go see another seal colony, with only a short detour needed to reach either of these spots. As you head north up the coast, the Meraki Boulders and Cafe provide a fantastic lunchtime stop-off point with some really tasty food options for fairly reasonable prices. The boulders have been slowly unearthed from the cliffs and now sit loose on the beach, providing some fun photo opportunities and again, a lovely, lovely beach. After lunch break, it's time to head up and into the town of Oamaru, a town with an old Victorian quarter and the home of steampunk in New Zealand. Oamaru has plenty of parking available on the seafront that lets you explore the town by foot. Start off by pottering through the old streets and check out the Whitestone City Museum, which is based all around the Victorian period. Our personal favourite attraction in Oamaru is Steampunk HQ. It's home to many different steampunk-inspired contraptions and exhibits. There's experiences such as the Portal, which is a beautiful light show, and a mystical organ that provides all kinds of music. It's fairly reasonably priced at $15, and I can guarantee you won't have ever visited a place like it. As the day draws to a close, grab yourself some dinner, maybe fish and chips on the seafront, and if you've got some funds left, hopefully you'll have got yourself booked in to see some fluffy little friends at the Oamaru Penguin Colony. At the colony, you're able to view more than 100 of the world's smallest penguins, the little blue penguin, come ashore to their nests. Originally a natural colony, the proximity to the town led to conservation methods needing to be put in to help support the penguins. By visiting the attraction, you're helping support the conservation efforts of this constantly growing colony, you're talked through the history of the colony, and you have an opportunity to ask whatever questions you'd like about the penguins. Settle down in your accommodation. Again, there's campsites and holiday parks near the centre of the town. We actually stayed slightly further out in Kakanui, just to the south of the town, and it was a very reasonably priced campsite which had all the normal facilities you'd expect. Day 12. Twizel. Waking up in your accommodation, it's time to head back inland and towards the lakes that form a lot of people's lasting memories of New Zealand. However, on the route up to Lake Pukaki, there are many interesting spots to stop off at. The first of which is the Elephant Rocks, used in one of the Nadia films. They're a massive collection of limestone rocks taking on a sort of elephant shape, if you squint. Maybe. Another spot to stop off at could be the Benmore Dam, a huge hydroelectric dam located at the entrance to Lake Avamore. There's info about the history of the dam on information boards and a really nice walk around the peninsula that gives a view out over the surrounding mountains and could even give a peek of Lake Pukaki off to the north. It's a couple of hours loop, so maybe one to miss out on if you don't have time. Another unique location en route to the Twizel area are the Omarama Clay Cliffs. These cliffs, hewn out over thousands of years, let you walk amongst them, exploring all the nooks and the crannies. The cliffs are located about 10 kilometres down a private farmer's road, with an honesty box set up to help maintain the road to and from the car park. It's actually in pretty good quality for a non-paved road, and it gives access to such a unique location. Heading north from Omarama, it's time to stop off at Twizel and enjoy the rest of the afternoon relaxing at your accommodation. As there's not been a whole lot of time to do this on your journey so far, there's a couple of holiday parks that are available. They've got cabins, campsites available for hire, and the holiday park that we've used is the Lake Ruataniwa Holiday Park. I think I said that right. It is right on the lakefront, and if you start to get itchy feet, there is a walk all the way around the lake that you can do from there. Day 13. Tekapo. It's time to finally see the lakes everyone talks about, Lake Pukaki and Lake Tekapo. First up is Lake Pukaki. You'll be heading all the way up the west coast of the lake, and the view in front, well, it's hard to come up with words to describe it. The road leads all the way to the car park at the start of the Hooker Valley Trail, which leads to some fantastic views of Aoraki, New Zealand's tallest mountain. The trail is a lovely flat path that takes a couple of hours to complete there and back, and at the end of the trail, you've got the shore of a glacier lake right in front of the mountain, and if you're lucky, you'll have blocks of ice all through it, and might be one of the coldest swims you ever take. Heading back from the walk, it's time to head to the end of the lake, and you've got the option to stop off and sample some salmon from the local area. and there's also information boards explaining a little bit about the history of the lake and the area. There's many viewpoints along the road, so make sure to say goodbye to Aoraki and take in those views before you head round that corner and head off to Tekapo. Less than an hour away from Aoraki is the turnoff to Mount John. This is a private road that costs a few dollars to drive up, but the views from the top are spectacular. The mountain's home to an observatory, and the entire area surrounding the lake is known for its fabulously starry skies on a clear night. There's even a cafe at the top of the mountain if you arrive early, and then you can have a bite of lunch up there and take in the views. Once you've had enough of looking down on the lake, it's time to get down to shore level and explore Tekapo town. It's home to the small little church of the Good Shepherd and has a sculpture park in the area close to the lake shore. There's a choice of restaurants and supermarkets to find your dinner in, and the accommodation varies greatly from the Lake's Edge Holiday Park to the YHA Hostel to some of the much more luxury spa resorts in the area. Which, as it's going to be your last night, why not check them out? Day 14, Christchurch. After a lie-in, it's time to head back towards Christchurch. However, there's plenty of stops to stop at on the way. A fair way out and off the main route is Mount Sunday. It's one of the most iconic Lord of the Rings locations, Edoras. We recently visited here and have a whole separate video showing off the area and what it has to offer. As you continue north, you'll reach the Rakaya Gorge, which is home to a 4-hour walking track. There's various spots where you could choose to turn around early and make it a shorter walk, but the blueness of the water and the view from the bridge make it well worth a short stop. Less than 20 minutes from the Rakaya Gorge are the Washpen Falls, a walking track on private land that has a small cost to enter, but goes through native forest and surrounded with birds, waterfalls, and even a cave. On a clear day, you'll be able to see the Port Hills around the south of Christchurch off in the distance, and it's now time to head back into the city. If you arrive in Christchurch early and have some free time before your rental car is due back, maybe consider taking a trip out to the gondola, which gives you amazing views across the city and Lyttelton. While the gondola itself is not the cheapest attraction, you can actually walk up the bridle path that runs almost alongside it. It's a fairly steep route that was the path that some of the European settlers used when arriving into Christchurch. Lyttelton was the port of choice due to being sheltered from the winds coming off the Pacific, and this meant the first taste that settlers got of New Zealand was walking up the hill and then just being greeted by this huge view in front of them and then having to go down. There's a monument at the top that commemorates the fact this was the path that they took, and it gives views across both sides of the hills. If you're greeted by a rainy scene when arriving into the city, you could pop into the Canterbury Museum's temporary exhibition. There's a small portion of the total artefacts in the museum's collection visible, alongside a temporary exhibition space. The main museum is currently under renovation and will be for the next few years, with an expected completion date of 2028. Other activities on rainy days include Quake City, an intriguing look at the earthquakes that devastated the city. The exhibition features personal insights into the events that happened throughout the moments of the earthquakes and the recovery effort in the days and weeks that followed. If you just fancy some tasty food and a bit of shopping, then the Riverside Market in the city centre provides a great spot to try some out, or head to one of the large shopping centres such as Westfield and Brickton as a retail fair. So that just about sums up my 14-day itinerary for New Zealand South Island. There's obviously a lot crammed into these 2 weeks, and you'll be driving close to 3,000 kilometres if you follow this route. Now, in terms of breaking down the cost, obviously this varies hugely depending on the time of year you visit, but I've used October here to calculate the rough costs for a travelling party of 2. If you're camping, then each night's accommodation is likely to cost no more than $40 maximum, and that's on a holiday park, giving access to a kitchen and potentially power if you're in a camper van that needs it. If you're using campsites run by the Department of Conservation, then these are a lot cheaper, with some even being free. I'd say an average of $30, probably playing it safe. So camping, looking at just over $400, £200, $250 USD. If you're looking at staying in a hostel, then I'd say close to $50 per night per person is a reasonable average, with large variance being on the hostel quality and location. This is usually going to be in a shared room with bunk beds, no more than 6 people maximum. Working that out across the 2 weeks, $1,400, £700, $850 USD. While hotels are available, they're very hard to calculate the cost of because they're much more pricey and aren't really an option in some places if you're looking to visit on a reasonable budget. Personally, I think you're missing out on a lot of the vibe of the hostels and campsites if you choose to use hotels, but I do understand some people like their luxury accommodation. Cars and camper van hire is another huge cost to consider, with a massive variance of spending depending on the type of vehicle chosen. I've looked at a couple of websites for October, and a hatchback for 14 days is going to cost roughly $500 to $600. That's a rough cost, about $50 a day for the hatchbacks, but if you're looking for like an SUV or something, closer to $100. Camper vans come at a much larger cost, and again can vary hugely in prices. Looking at a smallish camper van, it's close to $150 a day, so roughly $2,000 for the entire trip. There are very compact campers that are closer to $100 a day, so $1,400, but it's really down to your own personal preference on comfort and functionality. Do some searching around though, because there's a massive amount of rental companies based in Christchurch, and you may well find yourself a bargain. It's important to remember these costs don't come with any of the additional insurance offered by the companies, so you may well have a large deposit held against your card when you take out the hire. Again, this cost will vary between companies as well as the amount of cover provided by the insurance. Fuel costs are another huge cost to consider here, with a large amount of kilometres travelled. Fuel prices are constantly changing, but I'm going to use an average cost of $2.90 per litre. And again, your choice of car makes a huge difference to fuel efficiency. Camper vans are less fuel efficient than a hatchback. So here's a couple of calculations. A camper van is going to cost roughly $800 on fuel at least. I wouldn't be surprised if it costs more depending on what camper you choose. If instead we look at running a hatchback, you're going to be looking roughly 7.5 litres, 100 kilometres from what I can see. So $650, so a good chunk less than a camper van. The cost of the accommodation does more than make up the difference, but then the cost of the hire, so they're quite close. Another important thing to consider in your costing is food. Again, this varies hugely from person to person. Personally, I'm pretty happy having beans on toast and pasta most days, but some variation in there is always good. If you're sticking to strictly budget food, you could probably look at $5 to $10 per day maximum, so sub $150 for the entire 2-week trip. With some more trips out to restaurants and varied meals, I'm looking at least double, potentially triple that if you want to eat out regularly. You're on holiday after all. The other expenses are all optional really, as there's such a huge range of free activities in most places you could visit. You could get away with not actually paying for a single activity on your trip. I wouldn't necessarily say that's the best way to go about it, as some of the experiences such as whale watching aren't really accessible in many other places across the world. Adding it all up, this is the price looking at without any trips or activities included. Roughly $3,600 for a trip by camper van with a reasonable budget for food, stays in holiday parks more frequently than the cheaper DOC campsites just to give you the opportunity for power, or $3,100 for a trip by car. That's a larger budget for food because you may run into limited cooking facilities at certain hostels and spots. If you're looking for a more luxury trip, you're going to be looking at least double this cost really. That's just due to limitations on locations, more luxury cars coming in at a hugely increased cost, and just a whole lot of other factors. And hopefully that's opened your mind to the wonderful locations and trips you can complete by visiting. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments or send us a DM on Instagram, as we're more than happy to help give you some tips and tricks for your journey.